So I'm going to attempt to lecture on section 4.1. And in section 4.1, it's a section on different numbering systems. And the only thing we're going to work with in section 4.1 is Roman numerals. There are other numbering systems that are in this section that I don't even know how to do myself, but I can't ever see having the need to work with those. I see Egyptian numerals and I guess Chinese. I just couldn't write those Chinese numerals, so we're not doing those. So anyways, our numbers, for what it's worth, are called Hindu Arabic numbers. And so the numbers that you're generally used to writing maybe numerals or numbers. That's just your generic, 1, 2, 3, 0, blah, blah, blah. And what we're going to work with in this section is a numbering system that you might be vaguely familiar with, are Roman numerals. And I'm not going to, I printed out my handout, and I'm going to use it really sparingly here. I'm not going to use my handout too much. So you don't absolutely have to have it printed out for this lecture. So Roman numerals are the numbers I just means 1, V means 5, X means 10, L means 50, C means 100, and D means 500, and M means 1000. So ultimately, I can make any number up that's using those symbols. In Roman numerals, we don't have negative numbers, we don't have fractions, we don't have zeros. In our Hindu Arabic numerals, we really only have the numbers 0 through 9. And I can make up any number with a combination of the numbers 0 through 9. With Roman numerals, I can make any number from 1 up to a million or billion, I guess, using the I, V, X, L, C, D, and M. This won't make its way onto the test, but if we put a bar over a number, we multiply it by 1,000. So a V with a bar means 5,000. Technically, an I with a bar means 1,000, but since we already have a symbol for 1,000, we don't do I's with bars. An X with a bar would mean 10,000. There's a homework problem or two that comes up that has a bar on it, and there certainly won't be on the review nor on the test. But if I take any of the Roman numerals other than the I, and I put a bar on top of them, that means to multiply the number by 1,000, which is the same as adding 3 zeros. So these are Roman numerals. They're not super common, and I'll briefly talk about them, but not so much in the homework. So in Roman numerals, any number that's an integer, positive integer, can be made with a combination of these numbers. And now I'll try to explain how to write, maybe the numbers from 1 to 100 using Roman numerals, just so you can kind of see how they work. So I'm going to make, again, I'm lecturing without my notes in front of me because I don't know that the notes are really needed for this section. So I'm going to try to show you how to write Roman numerals for a bunch of numbers, just so you can kind of get into a groove here of understanding them. So I'm going to start by writing the numbers from 1 through 20. 1 I said is an I, and you kind of have some flexibility here. I often write my I with like an I, but if you don't write you make it look like a 1, it's not wrong. So that would be the number 1. If I put 2 I's next to each other, that would represent the number 2. If I put 3 I's next to each other, that would represent the number 3. So it's a nuisance, but it's not so hard to get the first 3 numbers, 1, 2, 3, with Roman numerals. The next number, it would be wrong. It's not the case that in Roman numerals we would write I, although it makes sense that that would stand for 4. That's not what 4 is equal to. That would be a wrong representation of 4. We never have 4 of the same digit written in a row for Roman numerals. What the Romans did is they would take the next number and write a smaller number to the left of it. So this IV means 1 less than 5, which is 4. So anytime I have a smaller number written to the left of a bigger number, I is less than V, I subtract that from the bigger number to give me what that number is equal to. So IV is 1 less than 5, which is 4. The next number, 5, is on my list of Roman numerals, so I don't need to make up anything new for it. 6, I'm going to write with a V for 5, plus 1 for an I. That's going to give me a 6. 7, I'm going to write a V with 2 I's. That's 5 plus 1 is 6 plus 1 is 7. In 8, I'm going to write a V with 3 I's. I can never have 4 of a kind, so the next number I write can't be a V with 4 I's. So the numbers 1 through 8 are displayed, and notice in each of the numbers I could have a maximum of 3 of the same symbol. To do 9, I can't write a V with 4 I's. That's not acceptable. But there is a 10, and if I write an I to the left of 10, writing a smaller number 1 to the left of a bigger number means to subtract that number from the bigger number, and 1 less than 10 would be 9. So there's a big difference. If you look at problem, what the representation for 4 and 6, where the smaller number is written tells you whether you add or subtract. 1 is less than 5, it's written to the left of 5. For 4, so you subtract. For 6, 1 is less than 5, the I is less than the V, but it's written to the right, so you add. So similarly, when I get down to the next numbers, 10 is just the Roman numeral with the X, and then 11 is to have an X and then an I next to it. So because 1 is smaller than 10, writing it to the left of 10, you subtract it from 10. Writing it after 10, you add it to 10. And that gives me an 11. If I did an XII, that would give me a 12. And an XIII will give me a 13. To do a 14, I can't write 4 I's. I'm going to basically, to do 14, I'm going to write 10 plus 4. And I'm going to write an X for the 10. And for a 4, I'm going to write an IV. So that's how 14 would look. 15 is going to be a 10 plus a 5. So I'm going to write an X for the 10 and a V for a 5, and 10 plus 5 is 15. 16 is going to be XVI, a 10 plus a 6. 17 is going to be X 10 plus 7, so XVII. 18 is going to be 10 plus 8, so XVIII. 19 is going to be 10 plus 9. It would be 1 less than 20, but I don't have a symbol for 20. So I'm going to write 19 as 10 plus 9. 10 is going to be an X, and the 9 is going to be IX. And if I go to 20, 20 is 10 plus 10, which I'm going to write as 2 X's. So I'm not supposed to be an expert or really know how to write Roman numerals just yet, but this is just to get you kind of in the flow for Roman numerals. Let me do another column of numbers to see if we can keep going here. So I'll go 21, 22, 23, as many as I can fit here. And it would be great if you could pause the video and see if you can guess what the numbers or Roman numeral representation for the numbers are. But if you can't, that's okay. If you look at my work, it's going to be the case that anytime a number has a 4 in it or a 9 in it, you get a backwards number, because 4s and 9s kind of require 4 of a kind in some sense. So to do 21, I'm going to write a 20, which is a double X, 10 plus 10 is 20, and then an I to give me 21. To do 22, I'm going to write a double X for 20, and then a double I for 2, and that's going to be 20 plus 2, which is 22. For 23, double X for 20, triple I for 3, that's going to give me a 23. For 24, I'm going to think of that as 20 plus 4. I'm going to do a double X for 20, and then an I and a V for 4, because I couldn't write 4 I's. And again, anytime I have a 4 or a 9, I'm going to get something that's backwards. And maybe I should talk about the backwards numbers before I fill in this sheet. So in general, Roman numerals, well, Roman numerals that other than 1, I see 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, and 1000. Let me talk about the backwards Roman numerals that are acceptable. So if I put an I to the left of 5, or left of V, I get a 4. That's an acceptable Roman numeral, and I is the only number that's smaller than V, and it's the only number that would make sense to write to the left of V that's smaller than it. Similarly, an IX is an acceptable Roman numeral that stands for 9. They don't use VX, because VX would stand for 5. It would be 10 less than 5 less than 10. I already have a symbol for 5. When we go to the L, the Romans won't use IL. They won't use VL, but they will use XL. XL is going to be 10 less than 50, which is 40. For 45 and 49, they'll have different numbering systems, so the IL and VL aren't acceptable. Similarly, they won't write IC, which seems to me like it would be 1 less than 100, which would be 99. That's not something Romans do. They won't use VC, which seems like that should be 95. They won't use that. And they don't use LC. LC would be 50 less than 100, which seems to be like 50. They won't use that as well. But what they will use is XC. And XC is going to be 10 less than 100, which is 90. For the D's, they won't do ID, which seems like it should mean 499. That's not something the Romans did. They won't do VD, which seems like it should be 495. They won't do XD, which seems like it should be 490. They won't do LD, which seems like it should be 450. But they will do CD. And CD is 100 less than 500, which is 400. And the only thing with the M that they do is they do a CM. And a CM is 100 less than 1,000, and that's going to be 900. So when we have the need to write a number with a 4 or a 9, you'll see that all these 4, 9, 40, 90, 400, 900, it's going to require me to write a smaller number to the left of a bigger number, and there's only certain combinations that the Romans allowed. They kind of had rules that I'm not completely sure of all the rules, but I can write down lots of Roman numerals, and I know what some things that they can't do. So getting back to my list here, 25 is going to be 2 X's for 20 and a V for 5. 26 is going to be 2 X's for 20 and a VI for 6. 27 is going to be XX, which is 10 plus 10, which is 20, and a VII, which you see right next to it, for 7. 28 is going to be XX, VIII. Really the only time we see Roman numerals anymore, I think, are for Super Bowls, and that's probably about the extent of them. 29, I want 2 X's for 20, and then for the 9, I'm going to put an IX. 30, I'm going to put 3 X's. It's okay to have 3 of a kind, and 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. 31 is going to be XXX with a 1. 32 is going to be XXX with 2 1s. 33 is going to be XXX with 3 1s. 34 is going to be XXX for 30. I can't have 4 1s for the 4, but I can write an IV for the 4. So 34 is going to be XXXIV. 35 is going to be XXX and V. I didn't write 36, but that's okay. I don't really need it. 37, I can write XXX for 30, and then VII for 7. 38, XXX for 30, and then VIII for 8. 39, XXX for 30, and then IX for 9. And 40, I can't write 4 X's, I'm going to write an XL. Okay, so that's a bunch of Roman numerals. I can keep going, but eventually it gets to be kind of just too cumbersome. So when I'm working with Roman numerals, I always have in front of me or memorize real specifically these numbers. So I need to know that, that I is 1, that V is 5, that X is 10, that L is 50, that C is 100, that D is 500, that M is 1000, and then I also need to have the backwards, and the backwards ones gives me 4s and 9s. IV would be 4, IX will be 9, XL will be 40, XC will be 90, CD will be 400, and CM will be 900. And if that's all I know for Roman numerals, that's really all I really need to know to do all the problems that I need to do. So there's 2 things we need to be able to do. We need to be able to take a Roman numeral and write it as a normal Hindu-Arabic number, and we need to be able to take a Hindu-Arabic number and write them as a Roman numeral. It's actually easier to just take a Roman numeral and write it as a Hindu-Arabic number. So I'm going to start looking at problems 21 through 32, and the instructions ask me to write as a Hindu-Arabic number, which is just a regular number that would be used to. So what I'm going to do is I'll do most of the even problems in this section, and try to find one that's a trick problem to start off first. So anytime I'm asked to take a Roman numeral and write it as a Hindu-Arabic number, I follow the same procedure every single time. Snuck a bar. No, it doesn't. So if I'm given the instructions to write something from a Roman numeral into a regular number, the first thing I do is I scan the number and I look for backwards. The backwards are IV, IX, XL, XC, and CD. If I look at the first number, I see an XV and an I, and I don't see an I then a V, I don't see an I then an X, I don't see any of the other letters up here. So to write 22 as a Roman numeral, from Roman numerals into regular numbers, the X stands for the 10, the V stands for a 5, and the I stands for a 1. I'm just going to take those numbers and add them together. So XVI is going to be 10 plus 5 plus 1, because X stands for 10, V stands for 5, I stands for 1. 22, written as a Hindu Arabic number, is going to be 16. If I went to 24, the first thing I do when I look at 24 is I look for any of the backwards. So a DL is not a backwards or smaller written to the left of a bigger. LX is not the same as XL. That's not bad. XV isn't a bad thing either. There aren't one of these situations. The fact that there's not one of these situations, that allows me to just take each number and write down what it represents. So D represents 500. This L represents 50. Each of these X's represents 10. I can write them down as a 20 if I want to. And that V represents 5. To figure out what this Roman numeral is as a Hindu Arabic numeral, I'm just going to add those individual numbers together. 500 plus 50 is 550, plus 10 is 560, plus 10 is 570, plus 5 is 575. So for 24, DLXXV is equal to the number 575. 26 and 28 have numbers that need to be grouped together. They have backwards numbers. The first thing that I'm going to worry myself with in 26 is the CM. A CM is a special number, and those letters need to be bound together. So when I look at 26, I look for any of these 4s or 9s, and those numbers have to be bound together before I can figure out what it is as a Hindu Arabic number. Now I'm going to write what each number represents. M represents 1000, CM represents 900, X represents 10, V represents 5, and I is 111, which I'm going to write as 3. I'm just going to add those numbers up together. So 1000 plus 900 is 1900, plus 10 is 1910, plus 8 is 1918. So that would be like the year 1918 if you wanted in Roman numerals. Okay, let me go to the next problem and see if there's any backwards 4s or 9s that I need to worry about. MDCC, I see this XL. XL is a 4 that I need to keep together. So I scanned through and I looked for any IVs, IXs, XLs, XCs, CDs, or CMs. Any of those need to be bound together. And now I'm going to write down what each number is. So the M is 1000. The D is a 500. Each of these C's is 100. There's 2 C's with, I'm just going to write 200 for those. But I could have written 100, 100. The XL is a 40. The V is a 5. And the I is a 1. If I add these numbers up, I'll figure out what this is as a Roman numeral. So this is 1500, 1746. So to do the Roman numerals properly, it's just imperative that you have this list handy, and when you do the test in class, I'll write these numbers on the board. You don't have to have these memorized. I don't certainly have them memorized, and it's not that important to be able to do that. So let me dig through some more problems in this grouping, and skip over the ones with the bars for now. Let me dig out some of your homework problems, and then I'll do a couple with the bars. But the bars won't be on the test. So let's try, and maybe you can try these without me. So 21 XIX, 23 DXL VII, 25 MCD XCII, 27 MMCMXLVI, and then there's the ones with the bars that will maybe do one of those, but those won't be test worthy to worry about. So anytime I'm asked to write something that starts as a Roman numeral and write it as Hindu, Arabic, or regular numbers, I look for any of the 4s or 9s, and hopefully you've done problem 20. Hopefully you paused the video, did all 4 of these problems, and then now you're watching just to check yourself. So when I do 21, I see IX is a 9. Those numbers need to be bound together. So any 4, 9, 40, 90, 400, or 900 need to be kept together. And now I'm going to write down what each number is. The 10, the X is a 10, the IX is a 9. I'm going to add the 10 and 9 and get 19. So 21, if you did this ahead of me, you should write 19. Similarly, for 23, I look for any 4s, 9s, 40, 90s, 400s, or 900s, and I see an XL, and an XL is a 40. I don't see any other 4, 9, 40, 90, 400, or 900, so nothing else needs to be bound together. Now I'm going to write down what each number is. D is 500, XL is 40, V is 5, and II is 2. I'm going to add those numbers up together, and if I did that right, I get 547. For 25, there's 2 sets of numbers that need to be bound together, because there's a 400, which is a CD, and there is a 90, which is an XC. So when I go to do problem 25, before I write down what each digit represents, I find any 4s, 9s, 40s, 90s, 400s, or 900s and circle them. Now I'm going to write down each number. An M is a 1000. A CD is a 400. An XC is a 90, and an II is a 2. If I add those numbers up together, I'll get 1492. And the last non-bar problem also has some 40s and 90s, or 400s and 900s I need to contend with. It has a CM, which is a 900, and it has an XL, which is a 40. So let me now write down what each of these numbers are. M is 1000. I could write 2000 for the 2 M's that have been more efficient. A CM, again, I don't have that memorized. Just because I have the sheet in front of me, I can do that. An XL, a V, and an I. And that's 2,946. So just add those numbers up, and you get 2946. So to take something that's in a Roman numeral that doesn't have a bar, I look through the numbers. I look for a 4, 9, 40, 90, 400, or 900, box those up, and then underneath each number, I write down the regular value for that Roman numeral, then I just add the numbers up. When the numbers have bars, you multiply them by 1000. So if let me just do at least one problem. I can maybe do 30 on 32 to just so you can see this. I won't test on bars, and there are some problems with bars that I can write the answer 2 ways, and I'm not really even sure what the correct way is. I asked another 142 teacher, and they weren't so sure. So I'm not going to test on bars, but they exist. So 30 gives me an L bar and an MCM XL IV. I'll deal with the bar separately, but first I'm looking for any backwards, any 4s, 9s, 40s, 90s, 400s, or 900s. And as I look at this, I see a CM, and a CM is a 900. I see an XL, and XL is a 40, and I see an IV, and IV is a 4. So I have a 900, a 40, and a 4. And L bar is an L multiplied by 1,000, so L bar is going to be 50,000. So when I go to write down what each of these pieces represent, the L bar, L by itself is 50, but a bar means to multiply by 1,000 or add 3 zeros, so I get 50,000 for the L bar. The M is 1,000. The CM is 900. The XL is 40. And the IV is 4. I'm going to add those numbers up. So it's going to be 51,944, and you might need your calculator to add those up. I might as well do the last one in this section that's even anyways. So 32 is another one with a bar. It's not so hard taking a number with a bar and writing it as a Hindu Arabic numeral. The hard part is going backwards, taking a Hindu Arabic numeral, writing it as a Roman numeral, and doing it properly. So when I go through this problem, I look for backwards. MC is not backwards, CM is backwards. I don't see any 4s, 9s, 40s. I don't see an IV. I don't see an IX, XL, XC, CD, or CM. So I'm going to just write down what each piece is and add them together. A V is 5, a V bar is 5,000. So this V bar is going to be 5,000. This M is going to be 1,000. 3 C's, I can write 100, 100, 100, or I can write 300. Similarly, 3 X's, I could write 10, 10, and 10, or I can just write 30. And 3 I's, I can write 1, 1, and 1, or I can just write 3. So for 3 of a kind, it's not that hard for me to figure out what CCC, XXX, and III mean. Now I'm going to add these numbers. 5,000 and 1,000 is 6,000, and then 333. So assuming I haven't made an algebra error or an adding error, I get 6,333. Okay, so that's the one direction. For me, that's the easier direction. Taking a Roman numeral and writing it as a Hindu Arabic numeral really just is a matter of having this in front of you and looking at your Roman numeral first for any 4s, 9s, 40s, 90s, 400s, or 900s. I guess 4,000s and 9,000s might be appropriate too, but we just won't get that big. And writing, after you find the 4s, 9s, 40s, 90s, 400s, 900s, just writing down what each numeral represents and then adding the numbers together. Going backwards is a little trickier. It's not insanely difficult, but it's definitely the harder of the directions. So when I go backwards, and that's what problems 33 through 44 want me to do, they give me just a regular Hindu Arabic number, and they want me to write it as a Roman numeral. And it's kind of the same sort of thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break each number down into its tens, its ones, its tens, its hundreds, its 500s, and then write down what each number is. So for this problem, 94 is really, I need to consider the tens, which are 90, plus 4. And now I'm going to write down a Roman numeral for each one of these. So 90 is a special Roman numeral. It's an XC. 4 is a special Roman numeral. That's an IV. To write down 94 as a Roman numeral, I'm going to write the 90 first and the 4 second. So just XCIV. (36) wants me to write the number 269 as a Roman numeral. So I'm going to break the pieces up. There's a 200, there's a 60, and there's a 9. And now I'm going to try to figure out how to write each piece as a Roman numeral. So for 200, it's not a 40 or a 90 or 400 or 900. That should be reasonably straightforward. To do 200, I'm going to write CC, because each C is 100. For 60, that's going to be 50 plus 10, so I'm going to write an L first for the 50, a 10 next to it. That's going to add 10 to 50 and give me 60. And 9 is a special one. It's an IX. So I'm going to write CC, LX, ix 269. So for Roman numerals, to take a Roman numeral, to take a Hindu Arabic number and write it as a Roman numeral, I'd like to just take the pieces, break them down into their hundreds, tens, and ones, or thousands, tens, and ones, if that's the case, and then try to write each piece in its Roman numeral form. May not be the only way to do this, but it's the way I do it, and it seems to work fine for me. So 38, I see 4,285, and this is a bad problem because it requires a bar, and it's the kind of problem that there's room for argument in terms of what the answer is. So let's just skip these because 4,000 is a bad number. Well, maybe I'll do 39 and I'll explain the author's answer, and then I don't know if it's just going to, sometimes when things have multiple answers that I might consider correct, I start to worry about showing them to you. But let me just do a 39, which is that, and you won't have to worry about this on a test at all. But on 39, so this will not be on the test because it needs a bar. The author gives me the number 4,285. And so I'm going to break this into its pieces. It's thousands, which is 4 thousandths. It's hundreds, which is 200. It's tens, which is 80. And it's ones, which is 5. And most of these numbers are easy to write. It's the 4,000 that's a tough number. First of all, for 4,000, I just can't write 4 M's because that's 4 of a kind. So it would be wrong to write M, 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 M. I need a bar, and it's not on my list of bars. I don't see 4,000 on this list. And there's multiple ways I can think to write 4,000. The way the author writes 4,000 is this. The author writes an I and a V, which is 4, puts a bar over it, makes it 4,000. It seems to me like this might also be okay if you wrote an M, which is 1,000, next to a V bar, which would be 1,000 less than 4,000, 5,000, which is 4,000. To me, those are both acceptable ways to write 4,000, and I can't find anywhere online to say why one way is more correct than another, but our author uses the IV with a bar over it, so I'll be consistent with our author. So when you put a bar over something, you add 3 zeros or multiply by 1,000. This is a 4, adding 3 zeros, you get 4,000. For 200, that's easy for me. 200 is just a couple of C's. 80 is also not so hard for me. For 80, it's going to be 50, which is 50 and 30. So I'm going to write L, X, X, X for 80. I probably could have broken that up into 50 and 30, but I don't really feel the need to do that. And for the 5, I'm going to put a V. Now I'm going to write all these numbers next to each other. I'm going to leave a bar over the IV. I'm going to write a couple of C's, an L, 3 X's, and a V. And that's going to be 4,285. And absolutely it won't make any bar problems on the test in either direction. So I don't have to worry about that too terribly much. So any number that can't easily be made with this little sheet that I've been carrying from sheet to sheet is not going to find its way into the test. So 40, 6,274 is another problem that's going to need a bar. So when I assigned my homework, hopefully I was careful and didn't get too crazy, but I did with these bar problems. So really, in terms of the homework, you can skip any problem between 39 and 44 because these are bar problems, and I don't really want to worry about bar problems so much. Well, I'll do 40, and then I'll make up like just a couple random problems that might be more test worthy. So this is going to be 6,274, and it's the 6,000 that's going to need a bar. And our author, if I had to guess, our author would take a 6, which is VI, and put a bar over it to give us 6,000. And then for the 200, our author is going to do a CC. For a 70, an LXX. And for a 4, an IV. So this is going to be VI bar CC LXX IV. So I'm not sure I gave enough examples, so let me write down just a couple more practice problems that aren't in the text just to give you extra practice. So this is just extra practice just to take these and write these as Roman numerals. And I'll pick nice numbers. 64, 196, 4, 19. Notice I'm putting lots of 4s and 9s because those makes the things hard. 358 and 1,249. So pause the video if you don't mind. Try to work each one of these problems. You should definitely have that in front of you unless you have that memorized. And when you unpause the video, I'll work these problems out. So so I'm assuming now you've paused and you have your answers down for these. Now you're just checking. To do 64, this is 60 plus 4. 60 I'm going to do with a 50 plus 10. I'm going to write as an LX. 4 is a special number. Any 4 or 9, 40 or 90 is going to come on my sheet here. And a 4 is an IV. So I'm going to write this as LX IV. 196 I'm going to think of as 100 plus 90 plus 6. 100 is easy. That's just a C. 90 is not hard because I have that in front of me as an XC. And a 6 I can do with a 5 plus 1 as a VI. So I'm going to write this as C, XC, VI. 419 is going to be more challenging because it has the 400 and the 19. So I'm going to do 400, 10, and 9 for 419. So I wrote down the hundreds, the tens, and the nines. For 400, I see that here to be CD. So I'm going to write CD for 400. For 10, I'm just going to write an X. And for 9, I'm going to write IX. So this is going to be CD XIX. For 358, I'm going to get a 300 plus a 50 plus an 8. For a 300, I'm going to write CCC. That's 3 100s. For 50, I'm going to write an L. And for 8, I'm going to write a V for the 5 and an I for the 3 1s. And that gives me the 8. So CCC LV I would be perfect. And the last thing I'll do is 1,249. 1,000 is an M. 200 is a CC. 40 is an XL. And 9 is an IX. So by just having this little rubric or this little sheet in front of me, I should be able to take any number and write it into a Roman numeral. Similarly, this sheet should help me go backwards. So I will write this on the board when you're taking the test, just so you have this in front of you, because you don't absolutely have to have this memorized. So hopefully that gets you competent enough to write some basic numbers in and out of Roman numerals. And that's all we're doing in section 4.3. So you don't need to go any further. And as I look at my syllabus, it says to do problems 21 through 43 odds. Really, you can stop and not do any of the problems that have the bars in them. So if you stopped at 39, that would be completely fine. I think I said here what you can skip. So real quickly, let me just make sure I know this assignment. So you can do really 21 through 37 odds would be better for this particular section. All right, that's hopefully enough.